I've never been the type to believe in haunted objects. I'd watch those YouTube videos of dolls blinking on their own or rocking chairs moving in empty rooms, and I'd laugh. Staged, clickbait, cheap tricks. That was always my reaction. But that was before the mannequin. It started on one of those nights when I was trying to distract myself from the silence of my apartment. Living alone has its perks, but sometimes the quiet presses in on you like a weight. I had just gone through a breakup, and the stillness of the place felt unbearable. I turned on the TV just for background noise, but it didn't help. I craved something to fill the space. That's when I found myself wandering into a thrift store a few blocks away. It wasn't anything special, just dusty shelves lined with mismatched dishes, chipped furniture, and racks of clothes that smelled faintly of mothballs. But tucked into the corner, standing by itself, was her, a mannequin. It wasn't glamorous like the ones you see in department stores. This one was vintage, maybe from the 70s. Its paint was faded, the plastic yellowed with age, and there was a small crack along the left cheek. But something about it drew me in. Its posture was oddly human, one hand bent slightly at the wrist, as if it was frozen mid-gesture. And the face, though expressionless, had a kind of weary sadness that I couldn't shake. I told myself it would be practical. I've always liked sewing in my free time, patching clothes, making little adjustments. A mannequin could be useful. Plus, it would be company, something to fill the empty corner of my living room. So, I bought it. $30, cash. The cashier gave me a strange look as she rang it up. Not the usual, "You're weird for buying this" kind of look, but something quieter, hesitant, like she wanted to say something, but didn't. Instead, she just said, "No returns." Carrying it home was awkward. Its arms were detachable, so I had to sling them under one arm and balance the torso awkwardly against my hip. More than once, people on the street slowed down to stare, some even crossing the road. I laughed it off, pretending I didn't notice. By the time I got home, I was sweaty and annoyed with myself. What had I done? Why did I spend $30 on something so impractical? Still, I set her up in the corner of my living room. At first, it was almost funny. I draped an old coat over her shoulders, sat back on my couch, and tried to imagine what my ex would say if he saw me now. Probably something like, "You've officially lost it." That night,
I didn't own any fancy equipment, just a cheap indoor camera I'd bought months ago after someone tried to break into the building. It connected to an app on my phone, recording clips whenever it detected movement. Normally, it sat unused in a drawer, but that night, I propped it on a bookshelf, angled directly at the mannequin. I felt ridiculous, like a child setting traps for the monster under the bed, but I couldn't shake what I'd seen, or thought I'd seen. Before heading to bed, I muttered to the mannequin, "Don't do anything creepy tonight." The words slipped out without thought, and when I realized I was talking to it, my skin crawled. Sleep came fitfully. I tossed and turned, every creak of the building snapping me awake. Around 3, I sat up, half expecting to see the mannequin standing at the foot of my bed. It wasn't. It was still in the living room where it belonged. But even from my bedroom doorway, I could see its silhouette against the faint streetlight glow. Unmoving, patient. In the morning, my first thought wasn't coffee or breakfast. It was the footage. I opened the app, scrolling through the night's recordings. Nothing at first, just still images, the occasional flicker when I passed by before bed. But then, around 2:47 a.m., there it was. The camera had triggered. My throat went dry as I tapped the clip. The footage showed my living room, still and quiet. For about 10 seconds, nothing moved. Then, so subtly I almost missed it, the mannequin's head tilted. Just a fraction, a slow mechanical twitch, like a glitch in an old video.
I replayed it 3 times, leaning closer to the screen. It wasn't the shadows. It wasn't me imagining things. The head moved. A cold sweat broke across my skin. I told myself maybe the plastic had warped. Maybe it was gravity shifting the balance of the head. But even as I said it, I knew mannequins weren't built like that. They were rigid, solid. The next clip, recorded minutes later, was worse. At 2:53 a.m., the mannequin's right arm, detached when I first bought it, but secured tightly when I reassembled, shifted forward an inch. Just one stiff, jerky motion, like it had twitched in its sleep. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the floor. I sat there on the rug, breathing hard, staring at the dark corner of my apartment where the mannequin stood. I didn't even want to look at it directly, but I forced myself to. It was still, perfectly still. Later that day, I tried.
Sam and I stood frozen, our eyes glued to the mannequin. Its head had shifted right in front of us, not on a screen, not through a glitch, but in the flesh. I whispered, "You saw that, right?" Sam swallowed hard. Yeah, I saw it. The mannequin stared ahead with its blank, painted eyes, but the air felt heavy, charged, like the room itself was holding its breath. Sam backed toward the door. "Dude, I'm serious. Get rid of it. That's not normal." I wanted to argue, to tell him I needed proof, more footage, something to explain it, but the fear in his face mirrored mine. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to drag it out of the apartment. Not yet. After Sam left, I set the camera again. This time, I stayed awake, curled on the couch with every light in the apartment blazing. The mannequin stood in its corner, motionless. My eyes burned from staring too long, but I didn't dare blink. Somewhere around 2:45 a.m., exhaustion won. My head dipped forward, and when I jolted awake minutes later, the mannequin was closer. Just a step, maybe 2, but it was enough. I scrambled for my phone, hands shaking so badly I could barely open the camera app. Through the lens, I zoomed in on its cracked cheek, its chipped paint, its crooked fingers. It didn't move, not while I was watching. But when I reviewed the security footage later, my blood ran cold. At exactly 3:01 a.m., the mannequin leaned forward like a puppet pulled by invisible strings, then jerked in 3 stiff steps across the room. Its head snapped toward the couch, where my body slumped in restless half-sleep. And then it stood there, watching me, for 15 straight minutes. The footage showed me tossing, turning, unaware, and the mannequin, silent, patient, tilted just slightly forward as though listening. When I finally stirred, it retreated, not naturally, not fluidly, but in abrupt, stuttered frames. By the time I blinked awake, it was back in its corner. I dropped the phone, pressing my fists against my temples. This isn't real. This isn't... But it was. The proof was right there. Over the next few days, I became obsessed. I barely left the apartment. Work piled up unanswered. My sister called, but I let it go to voicemail. I couldn't focus on anything except the mannequin. Every night I set the camera. Every morning I reviewed hours of footage. And every day it was the same movement. Small at first. Head tilts, arm twitches, then bigger. Steps, reaching gestures. One clip showed it standing in the kitchen, facing the refrigerator. Another caught it near the front door, hand hovering just inches from the lock, as if testing it. I started barricading the door at night. Still, I couldn't throw it away. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted answers? Maybe some sick curiosity had rooted in me? Or maybe it didn't want to leave.
The mannequin was facing me. I hadn't touched it, I hadn't moved, but there it was, angled directly toward where I sat on the floor, laptop closed, heart racing. For a long time, neither of us moved. It stood silent and hollow, but the weight of its stare pressed on me until I couldn't breathe. Finally, I whispered, "What do you want?" My voice cracked in the empty apartment. Of course, it didn't answer. But that night, I didn't set up the camera. I didn't need more footage. I already knew the truth. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just plastic and paint. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, every nerve in my body humming. Around 3, I heard it. The sound of plastic scraping softly against the hardwood floor. Step by step. Closer. I shut my eyes, paralyzed, my breath shallow. A cold shadow fell across the room. Something loomed over me. When I finally dared to open my eyes, the mannequin stood at the edge of the bed. Its head bent down, inches from my face, the cracked cheek casting jagged shadows. For the first time, I smelled it, an acrid, chemical stench of old paint mixed with something rotten, damp. Its hand lifted, slowly, stiffly. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't move. All I could do was watch as those rigid fingers hovered near my throat. And then, the lights flickered. For a split second, the room strobed white, and in that flash, the mannequin's face was different. Not blank plastic, not neutral. A woman's face. Hollow-eyed, mouth twisted in silent agony. When the light steadied, it was just the mannequin again. But the fingers were closer. I bolted. I don't even remember getting out of bed. One moment it was leaning over me, and the next I was in the hallway, barefoot, sprinting for the stairwell. I didn't stop until I was outside, gulping down cold night air, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would tear me apart. I stayed with my sister after that. For 3 days, I didn't step foot in my apartment. I told her bits of the truth about the mannequin moving, about the camera, but not everything. I could see in her eyes she already thought I was losing it. On the 4th day, I went back. The door was still barricaded, untouched. Inside, the air was stale, heavy. I half expected to see the mannequin waiting by the door.
But it wasn't. It was gone. The corner where I'd first placed it was empty. The living room was bare except for the couch and coffee table. I searched every room, every closet, even under the bed. Nothing. I stood in the center of the apartment, shaking, trying to make sense of it. Did someone break in? Take it? But the barricade was still in place. The lock untouched. It had left. For weeks afterward, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw its cracked cheek, that faint, impossible smile. I dreamed of its plastic hands curling around my throat. Sometimes, late at night, my phone buzzes with a notification. Movement detected. I'll open the app, breath caught in my chest, and see nothing but static. But once, just once, I thought I saw it. A frame of white blur, a tall shape in the background, standing in the shadows. I closed the app, deleted it, and never opened it again. People still ask why I don't have furniture in my living room, why I avoid thrift stores now. I laugh it off, make some excuse. But the truth? I know it's still out there, somewhere, waiting for another home, another lonely corner, another person who thinks they're just buying a harmless mannequin. And when they do, it'll move.